My father worked hard all of his life, briefly for Lloyds Bank, and then he gave a lifetime of service to the Royal Air Force. In retirement, he was a local councillor. After my mother died, he had a series of strokes and he descended into dementia. He spent his last brief years in care. When he died, his estate had been savagely diminished. He left very little in his will. He wasn't a hugely wealthy man, but he had worked, he had saved, he had made provision, and it was wiped out. My brother and I nodded it through because it was the right thing to do to keep him well and safe. But it made us think about the system of how that could happen. So the learning curve about care was, for my brother and for me, a brutal lesson. So here we are, several years on, and the Prime Minister rightly pledges a root and branch reform of this service. Now, the criticisms that you've heard this afternoon from those who know and from those who seek to help the elderly and frail have demonstrated it remains a service in need of further but more thoughtful reform. The cap to me seems a helpful lid on costs, but the level at which it is set is patently unsatisfactory. You heard that from virtually all of my contributors, although Stephen Dorrell, and I would underline this, said it's a heck of a lot better than it used to be, and as I said in my introduction, it's better even than Dilnot said in his recommendations a decade ago. The exclusion of social security support from that cap, however, seems to me just plain wrong, and will clearly hit the poorest hardest. They are more likely to need social security help because they are the poorest. So it becomes a double whammy. And next year's higher national insurance costs, which so many of you referred to in your emails and tweets, seem especially cruel because despite, yet again, the promises, little of the money will actually go to care. It will continue to feed the voracious appetite for cash of the unreformed NHS. I really do think that ministers need to think again. Listen to me if you like, but more importantly, listen to Sir Andrew Dilnot, who crafted the first plans for reform. Listen to Ros Altman, who was on the programme first thing at midday, who's given a lifetime of service to the elderly on pensions and, crucially, on care. Listen to our viewers, who've given thoughtful and heartbreaking testimony about what it's like dealing with this dysfunctional system. But let's also have a fundamental debate, as I said to Stephen Dorrell, about what the state will and will not pay for. If somebody rewrote Peter Lilly's little list of where the fault lines lay in the welfare state, I suspect now, 30, 40 years on, care would be very near the top. It's not that vulnerable people are on the fiddle. It's just that it doesn't work for those who are in the most serious need. And it operates as a shock to many people who haven't given time to read up and find out what they are entitled to. I'm the first to acknowledge that the state cannot and shouldn't do everything. Personal responsibility is crucially important. But if the state decides it can do something on care, then it should be much clearer about what it will do and what it won't do. Accommodation, one of the single most expensive elements of care, is not included unless you are profoundly ill. My nightmare is that many of you don't understand that until it hits you in the face. People confronted with the need for care, for themselves, for their loved ones, their parents or their grandparents, will face the prospects with fear. They deserve honesty so as not to add to that fear. It is not a job well done. It needs to be, because our most vulnerable depend upon it.